A little bit about Terry Hernandez. She is the first executive director of the Chrysalis Foundation, establishing this public foundation focused on women and girls in Greater Des Moines in 1997. Prior to Chrysalis, Terry served as program officer for the Mid-Iowa Health Foundation and was public relations and development director for Iowa Lutheran Hospital and for the YMCA of Greater Des Moines. Terry also attended Iowa State University and the Upper Iowa Extension, ultimately graduating from William Penn University with a degree in marketing and management. And she and her husband, RJ, actually live in the country south of Des Moines. So let's give a warm peacock welcome to Terry Hernandez.
Thank you, Stephen. Well, thank you for being here. How many of you have ever heard of Chrysalis Foundation before? How many have heard of Ms. Well, you have, hooray! How many have heard of the Ms. Foundation? How many have heard of the Iowa Women's Foundation? Well, we have a few. Let me tell you just a little bit about Chrysalis Foundation. This was we are a public charity. We were started by some women feminists back in the late 80s because they felt as though most charitable money that was going to places like the United Way and other funding campaigns didn't specifically address issues for girls and women, and they felt that girls and women struggle disproportionately with a lot of issues. And I'll share a little bit about some of those here tonight. But Chrysalis is this year 25 years old. We operate like a public charity. About 2/3 of our money goes to programming for elementary and middle school girls because we really feel that's the best investment for the future, can make some changes early in life, because those of you that grew through adolescence and puberty know, especially for girls, that's a really difficult time in life. So working with girls at that age was hopefully our intent to keep them in school, help them see a direction and future in their lives, and avoid some of the barriers and pitfalls that can happen to teenagers in general, but girls especially. So I'm here tonight to talk about women in leadership, and I do want to talk about how women lead and why that is different from the way men lead. I also want to share with you what are some of the barriers, and there are some things that we maybe take for granted that cause delays in women's ability to move into leadership positions or to be perceived as leaders. So in 2012, the World Bank noted that in countries where women were leaders and decision makers, positive development was accelerated. And they could mark that those were the types of countries that were surviving economic crises and other types of issues much more rapidly than communities that weren't. The World Economic Forum also said that there is definitely a correlation between gender equality and an increase in a country's gross domestic product. Well, that's something that is nice to know because that's a tangible that happens because of women's leadership. But let's take a little step back. I always like to know the definition of words, and it's sad to know that the derivation of the word woman came from the name man. So from the Old English, you can see the derivation of the word woman. And I'm going to move, let's just see. I'm going to show you a little bit about Iowa, just to give you some framework about the state of Iowa. How many of you are originally from Iowa? So not even half, which is nice. Welcome to the others. Iowa in 2013 was just over half female population. The average age is about 39, a little bit older than 39. So you can see that we are an aging population. By race and ethnicity, we're pretty much white. We're pretty much Caucasian. It's exciting to see the diversity happening in our state. I could say it could be accelerated and I'd be even more thrilled. But you can see the breakdown of population, and this comes from the 2010 census. Women, by and large, are jumping leaps and bounds ahead of where we used to be in the 70s when I was in college. And 61%, so nearly 2/3 of college students now are women. Women with bachelor's degree, larger numbers, and equal numbers of advanced degrees. And I would say fairly soon we should surpass men in the percentage of women with advanced degrees. So we're moving ahead quite a bit in education. A lot of working women. This was 2010 again. So 8 out of 10 women who were at the age where they could be full-time employed. About 40% are employed in areas that are service-type positions. So education, health, and social services, which tend to be positions that perhaps aren't paid as well as positions that you might expect in a management or an executive position. The majority of those positions in education, you would guess, would be teachers. In health, a lot of nurses and a lot of nurse aides. And in social services, counselors, therapists, social workers, etc. And you can see that about an equal number are in management positions, which was good for us to know, but we weren't able to really track, are they in higher level management positions or are they simply considered a supervisor? In politics, we're in pretty pitiful shape. And you've probably already learned this. Iowa is one of 4 states that's never sent a woman to Washington, D.C., and one of 2 states that has never elected a woman governor. The other state is Mississippi. Now, I'm hoping in my lifetime that changes, and I hope in your lifetime it becomes commonplace. Our legislators are not even 1/4 female, and our Supreme Court justices, only a few have been female. So what does this tell us? This tells us that when decisions are being made on behalf of Iowans, who's making the decisions? Men. Now, if you're half of the population and someone else is making decisions on your behalf, how much control and power do you feel you have when you're not even at the table? So this is why a lot of the work to move women in political leadership in our state is really important. When we go to the Capitol, one of the things we try to remind legislators is think of the ramifications of your decision and how it would affect working women and their families. So one example that I give, and I was in Des Moines when our school board decided that every Des Moines public school should be let out early on Wednesday afternoons so teachers could have some in-service. So at 1 o'clock, every Des Moines public school opens its doors and the students leave. Well, now, how does that impact working parents who have to look for childcare? How about those that pay childcare providers and need that additional 2 or 3 hours then, or to go pick them up after school if they don't have childcare? Those of us that provide after-school programming, programs like Chrysalis programs, had to think about what we were going to do to fill in that gap. Now, had the school board put some thought into how this decision affects working families, and there are a lot of parents that leave work on Wednesday afternoons to go pick up their children because that's just the way that they've arranged their transportation. So long story short, if you think about how a decision affects girls and women, you might be thinking about making decisions a little bit differently. And this is from Catalyst. If you've heard of Catalyst, it is a think tank that really measures women's leadership and where we fall. So you can see the very top, and I think I have a little red thing here, not even 4% of women in the United States in the finance and insurance industries are in CEO positions. And over half are in the labor force. So they would be the data entry, the administrative assistant, etc. So we have a way to go. And this again is from 2010. But we think women are smart. Those of us that are here, you're smart women. You're in college, you're intending to work for a career. Women are smart and generally tend to be smarter by IQ than men. Women are strong. I'm not saying that we're equally physically strong, but women, and I'll tell you a little bit more about our constitutional strength, our vitality, which is proven to be stronger than men. Women are powerful, so when we are decision makers, we're able to influence others to believe in our decisions, and that is a form of influence and power. And we think women are great leaders, and I'll tell you why. U.S. Banker magazine came out with a study that said that when women are in the workplace, these are what happens to a corporate outcome. So you can see that increased revenue, improved service, and greater shareholder return on the dollar, it just makes business sense that women are in leadership positions. Credit Suisse did a research study that talked about how firms that were dominated by men recovered much more slowly from the recent financial recession. So much of this relates to the way that we make decisions, the way that we work together, and the way that we promote collaboration and continuity in a workplace. So why aren't there more women leaders? And I'm sure that this is a question that we'll continue to answer until we're at least half of the population of leaders. I'm going to show you a quick little video that I think pretty much represents what is one of the barriers to women in leadership. I think some of you may have already seen this. So. I give a lot of credit to Pantene Company. Pantene and Dove is another company that's working very hard on breaking stereotypes for women and girls. And you can see exactly what that little vignette showed you, that the perceptions and the labels that happen to women, particularly women who are strong and exhibit some of the same skills that men do, are considered to be something more negative. And that happens on a regular basis. How many of you have watched political campaigns and listened to how the description of the female candidate is as compared to the male candidate? I think of when Hillary Clinton was at the debates and they commented on what she wore and her hairstyle. Now, would they say that about a Barack Obama? Would they say that about a John Edwards? Haircuts, maybe, I guess, expense, but so you can see how even the emphasis in the media causes these stereotypes to be perpetuated. And why is that? I think there are a number of theories behind this. Years ago, when I was growing up, women generally didn't work. So in the 50s and 60s and prior to that, women were in the home. So men naturally filled every leadership position. And my sense is that because they were leaders, we tended to ascribe those traits that male leaders have to leadership. And so those stereotypes persist today. In United States largest companies, you can see that women are highly educated. Women are part of the executive MBA, and I met several women here that are pursuing MBAs. And women are 40% of the leadership workforce. But if you can see at the bottom, less than 2 in 10 are top executives, and less than 3 in 100 are chief executive officers. And you saw that in my diagram before. So what happens? Women are educated. Women have the skills. Well, part of what happens, and we see this in the numbers, women are promoted at a lower rate. Women receive less executive training, and this again probably comes from a little bit of the stereotype within the culture of a business. Harvard Business Review did a study as well and found that of qualified women, about a third of them stopped working for a period of time. Now, most of us know that's either to take care of a family, perhaps to have a child. 93% of those women want to return to work, and they can rejoin the workforce. A good number of them return to full-time jobs. But what happens to your leadership? What happens to your seniority when you come back to a position that you may have held? Typically, you have to start again. Then you have family responsibilities. So the workplace does not really lend itself well to what a working woman's life must be. There are differences in the way we lead as well. There are brain differences. And men's and women's brains, of course, are generally different. But interestingly, women excel at the types of things that build collaboration. Multi-level thinking, we're better able to multitask. We have emotional intelligence, which is that almost intuition type sense of being able to work with people by interpreting body language and interpreting terminology. We have a better understanding of that. We tend to be transformational versus transactional. So if you were to see a man who generally would want to get something done and put it away, women are much more about changing the way that it works, making something significant happen. If it's to fix a situation, if it's to sell something, regardless of what it is, we're much more in the realm of working to generate positive feeling, less stress, moving forward where everyone is happy in a win-win situation. So number 2, here's another way we're different, socialization. Women are collaborative, much more collaborative. We see this early on in life, and you see children playing who might be preschool age, and generally, who are the ones that are breaking down the blocks or knocking over the snowman? Girls are much more collaborative and inclusive. They want everyone to get along. They want to help others get along. Women tend to want to work on behalf of other women. We tend to be a little more creative. Now, that's not always to say that we aren't our own worst enemies, and I think I can talk a little bit about that later. But in general, women are about the improvement. The whole boat rises with the tide. All boats, I guess, is what the term is. And number 3, we're different by chemistry, and I'm not just saying estrogen. Research tells us that this chemical, oxytocin, is a brain chemical that tends to move forward when stress responses occur. It tends to help us calm ourselves. And when women are at work and when women face stressful situations, the oxytocin level increases. They're better able to be calm and be balanced in a stressful situation. We're better able to, what we say, tend and befriend as opposed to fight or flight. So we pay attention, we stick to it. We work through a situation instead of either making a decision and letting it go or simply running away. So that typical fight or flight response is not generally there. And oxytocin is the same chemical that helps women in really stressful situations and physical stress. So situations like childbirth, other types of situations where the body is called on to avoid that stressful impact. And women rate significantly higher among other workers. So if you were to do a survey within a work group or a survey within a women's group, these are the types of things that women excel in. And there are significantly greater skills in women than in men. But interestingly, if you were to ask the women leaders, they would not rate themselves so highly. We are very self-critical. So here's a suggestion to businesses as they think about helping women stay in the workplace or return to the workplace so that they can excel and move forward in leadership positions. I think this came from Working Mother magazine, who did a survey of the best businesses for working mothers. And they found that businesses that offered some of these benefits, so a flexible work schedule, maybe working at home, working from home, employee service, so if you have on-site, some companies now have on-site laundry facilities or on-site delis where you can pick up a meal and take it home. Childcare is a big one. And paid parental leave, of course, is of benefit to both women and men. So what else are we dealing with? There are a lot of other issues that present barriers to women in growing in leadership positions. So I want you to just take a look at some of the things that I've collected that tend to send messages, particularly to young girls. So in all of these advertisements, which come from the top companies on Wall Street, and this one is just beyond me. I can't figure out why a burger would be a bikini top. Violence. So you see in the national advertising scheme, the less clothes and the more violent, probably the better. Now this one is pretty insulting to women. I don't know if you've seen it, but it relates to a jewelry company. What does this say to us? What does it say to a young girl? Violence, power is okay. Notice she's sitting down, has a black eye. Even ages ago, and this ad came from the 1960s. So even then, we were berating ourselves. You mean a woman can open it? And it's a ketchup bottle, for goodness sake. Who couldn't figure that one out? This one even hits on religious tones. And I'll tell you what, if you want to really insult people, I think this is the one. I gave myself to Jesus, but now he never calls. This is the type of thing that's commonplace. So how old would you guess that that young woman is? Probably 10 or 12. And what is happening in the media now is we're looking more toward showing young women in advertisements as being sexualized and becoming objects. And part of the theory behind this is men are beginning to objectify younger women because what they're finding is that older women have more power, have more ability to control their own lives. But here is a situation with a young girl where a man would have total power and control. And this ad, I'm not sure even, it's BMW, I guess. So it's to entice a man to buy a BMW. How a young girl has anything to do with a BMW is beyond me. How many of you see the types of mommy shows? I think there's one about dancing. There are others about kids on the catwalk. So what are we telling girls? We're telling them that unless they're pretty, skinny, blonde probably, doesn't make any difference what they know, how clever they are, or what they think. What they are is what they look like. Now there are studies that tell us that before kindergarten, a young girl will see an average of 50,000 advertisements. And a teenager these days, can you guess how many hours a teenager, the average teen, is in front of a screen? So in front of a television, a computer, the internet, or a video game? 11 hours. 11 hours a day, a screen is telling a young girl, Here's what you need to look like. Here's what you need to be. This one's a little bit dated, but nonetheless just as insulting. So you see the sexualized images of young girls lead them to think that that's the only way they should be to be successful. We work with a child psychiatrist who tells us that there's a new diagnosis that they're calling Facebook depression. Have you heard of that? So on Facebook, and girls tend to have either a computer or a cell phone with them 24 hours a day. Parents get them out of their bedrooms, televisions as well. So they're constantly watching what's on Facebook about them, who's friending them, who's unfriending them, who's making a comment about them, who's taking pictures of them and posting them, who's making derogatory comments. And this bombards them 24/7. So you can imagine a young girl trying to keep up socially, emotionally. She's going through enough at adolescence with hormones and puberty and changes. And then she's got the whole social media world slamming her if she's not skinny, pretty, sexy, dressed well. It's also sending the same message to young men. No wonder girls get the wrong message. Women as well. When girls begin to see themselves as objects, they can justify being beaten. We find, especially in victims, that when we talk to victims of domestic violence or sexual violence, and by the way, 1 in 5 college women reports being raped during her college years. When we find that women tend to feel as though they're an object at the pleasure of men, then that's okay if he hits me because I must have done something that insulted him. And men get the same type of message. Once a woman becomes an object, there's nothing to worry about as far as hurting emotionally because you just need to be in control. If you look even globally at the countries that are at war, what I find is you can tell a lot about a country and its attitude about war and violence by the way it treats its women. So in countries where violence is condoned, even supported, where women are stoned for looking at another man, this tends to perpetuate that same issue about allowing violence to creep in and justify it. So even in children's toys, and I did a study on how children's toys had changed. And by the way, we're backsliding. So back in the 80s, and perhaps this is even before some of you were born, there used to be a lot more generalized toy sections. So you could find multicolor toys, a variety of different things for girls or boys. And there was some equity in what types of activities were being sold to girls and boys. This last holiday season, I noticed there was a pink aisle and there was a camouflage aisle. And never the twain would meet. And you can tell by the way, are these the Bratz? Does anybody know, is that what those are? So this is not the type of doll that I would have played with. But if a girl gets a doll like this, and granted they're trying to do a little diversity, so you see some Bratz of color. But even so, every single one of them, stiletto heels, eyeshadow, lipstick, curvy body, sexy attire, this is the message. I want you to see how different Disney characters look. So when you think about even the message that you see on the screen at the movie theater or kids see in their cartoons. Pocahontas used to look like a normal woman. Now she's a sex goddess of some kind. Even strawberry shortcake. Now, how can you defame strawberry shortcake? Did all of you probably grew up beyond strawberry shortcake? But this is the difference. in the way that characters are moving, and we don't seem to notice, and we don't seem to complain. So I just sometimes want to do a little flipping, because I used to always say, would you think that of a man? Would you say that of a man? What if you substituted men for women in some of these advertisements? So now, granted, there's a lot more tattoos and a lot more hair, but how would that sell something to you? And how would you like to see that? I love that one. Okay, so here are our superheroes. Glamorized, sexualized. Now, is that okay? What does that tell you? That they all are, I don't know, I don't even want to ask that question. But they have bustiers on, so lots of muscles under there. So you see at the top, the Hulk and whatever they are, and down below, it's a little tougher to see, but they all certainly are showing their backsides in unusual poses, looking fairly glam. Isn't that fun? And Steve Carroll, let me think who those guys are. You probably know. Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, yeah. They asked them to pose so that there would be some comparison of what a topless woman and topless men would look like, and I love this one. I don't think this would sell me anything. Too much chest hair, right. But you get the idea. So when you think about the types of things that we have to face as women and what young girls have to face, obviously there's a lot in the world that is pushing against us in every way. So whether it has to do with stereotypes, and that's something that's very difficult to break. I don't believe we're ever going to really to change the media, but I think what we can do is help ourselves navigate through it a little more safely and a little more sanely. And for the companies that do this type of thing, did you know Victoria's Secret has now come out with lingerie for 7 to 10-year-olds? There's a new line. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but there's a new line of little underpants and little bralettes that are targeting 7 to 10-year-olds. Now, when you talk to a group of schoolgirls, what is truly the sad result of this is that there's a huge percentage of 8-year-old girls, and probably younger than that, who already think that they're too fat. And the number of adolescent girls that don't like their bodies is over half, and that number keeps growing as they age. So when you see women sexualized as objects, and this is the epitome of where a woman should be, even in the workplace, no wonder we're getting the wrong message out. So I'd love for us to all be part of what we know to be a voice on behalf of reason. I don't necessarily even say that it's a voice for women, because it's a voice of reason. Now, if you start to look at gender flipping, like we saw in those ads, if you were going to show this to a man to say, does this look okay to you? Does that look okay to you? Start to think in those types of terms. And even in the business world, as you begin to think about the questions and stereotypes and ideas that we're asking women, I always wonder to myself, would they ask that of a man? If they would, then I think it's valid. More often than not, they wouldn't. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, believe me. So we know women are smart. We already know that. We don't have to think it, we know that. And we know by some of these statistics. We're increasingly college enrolled and in higher level degrees. We're the majority of medical doctorate degrees, Secretary of State. Now that's pretty cool. I'd love to see a woman in the White House in my lifetime. and Ivy League college presidents. I think you've got wonderful representation of women leaders on this campus, and all of you I include in that. We're smart. We know what we're doing. We're self-focused. We're headed in the right direction. We know women are strong. I mentioned that women are known to have greater constitutional vitality, meaning we can persist with things. We can work with a bad headache. We can move forward when the situation gets to be very stressful and we're feeling the physical effects of that stress. We're able to move forward because we have that oxytocin and we have the vitality, the stamina, the stick-to-itiveness that men don't have. And obviously there's some other physical factors. In Iowa, women outlive men by over 5 years. So in my lifetime, around the age of 45 or 46, I think men and women, there was an equal number of men and women. And then beyond that, as you get into my mother's age, so in their 70s and 80s, more and more women are outliving their husbands. And we'll see that continue to be a trend. We'll see that as users of healthcare, we'll see that as users of nursing facilities, etc. Hopefully we can all stay vital throughout our lives. We know women are powerful, both economically and politically. So you can see that now things have changed. Women are primary breadwinners in 2/3 of families, and we control a lot just by our purchasing decisions. Have you noticed how much marketers are targeting women now? ESPN has a women's webpage, I believe, and a women's sports initiative. You look at some of the marketing of things that you'll see within a sports event, and they're more targeted toward women. So they're looking, advertisers are looking at where the market is, but who goes and makes those buying decisions? Who chooses who to buy insurance from? Who chooses what sort of car to look for? By and large, 9 out of 10 times, it's the female in a family. And we own a considerable amount of wealth. Inherited through divorce, earned on our own, more often than not. We're also the largest voting bloc in Iowa. So we do have political power if we use it with education. And we know that women are great leaders because of some of the things that I talked about. So as a result of the way that women lead, by being more collaborative, these are factors that reduce turnover. They reduce absenteeism in work. They help increase shareholder value. The World Bank found that. So here are some of the things that keep me up at night. And these are the barriers that affect girls and women disproportionately to men. Many of them, you can see, relate to what I was just showing you, the over-sexualization, the objectification of girls at a very young age. So they learn to allow themselves to be treated in ways that aren't equitable, aren't fair, aren't healthy, get into bad relationships. Sex trafficking is huge in this state. How many of you have ever heard anything more about what's going on related to sex trafficking? We're starting an initiative with the Attorney General's office to make people more aware. Often we think of it as child prostitution, but more often than not, it's not a child prostitute, it's a child victim who is being prostituted. And we're even seeing what they call latchkey trafficking. So the girls that go home after school, maybe Big Brother is there selling her a few times to friends. Maybe stepdad is there selling her for a little extra income. She's an object. She's renewable. Trafficking is a huge crime. It's second now among organized crimes. It's the second highest volume organized crime in the world. Next only to, I think it's guns. It's either drugs or guns. But if you think of the commodity in sex trafficking, It's renewable. You can sell a girl over and over and over and over again in one night. And men are buying girls like what you see in that ad. Young girls, 11 to 14, which is the population that we work with in after school, are the prime population, are the primary targets of traffickers. So a lot of that early education, a lot of those early conversations need to take place. Some of it is just pretty simple. How many of you have heard of the Nike Foundation? Well, I want to show you a little video in closing that they created, because their theory is if you educate a girl, you save the world. So I think that tells us all, the message is we start at a very young age. For the girls in your lives, think about what you say in front of them. Think about how you compliment them. Think about what they're looking at in you as a role model. So often I tell women like my mother, you know, when you were talking as I was growing up about being on a diet, needing to get rid of that gray hair, having too many wrinkles, where do you think that went? And that happens on a daily basis. For dads, for men, you need to compliment young women on being clever, on being creative, on being smart, on being fast. Not pretty, not nice dress, you need to comb your hair. Not about looks. Let's think about keeping girls on track by knowing that they're smart, that someone is paying attention, and that someone knows that there's more to her than just what she looks like. I think once we get to the point where girls grow into women who know that they don't have to look like a supermodel to succeed, that they have a voice and an education, that they have the ability to lead regardless of stereotypes, and there will be a lot. You saw I was an aging population, and it's primarily a lot of old white men. I tell my dad, you know, when you go to the legislature, the men making decisions on my behalf are a lot of farmers, retired farmers. Well, what I want them to do is think about how they're deciding as relate to their grandchildren. It's an important message for all of us. It's important for us to continue to support each other. I urge you to see the movie. How many have seen the movie Misrepresentation? I will send you the DVD. This is an amazing movie that tells stories about women and girls in the media, but it also shows how women in politics are treated, and often by other women. So when you hear those comments, I encourage you to put a stop to them, to ask a question. What did you mean by that? Why would you think that? Would you say that about a man? So that you can keep other people aware, and we begin to move the needle on the way that girls and women grow up. I think that's all I have to say. So, questions? Did I start questions, stop questions, answer questions? Well, I wish you all tremendous success. You look like you're excited about the future. I think we'll have a lot of future leaders in here. How many are taking courses in leadership type classes, business classes? You're in the right direction, but I think all of you, getting a college education makes a huge difference. Getting a high school education makes a huge difference. And I have some graphs that we use to tell the business case about high school graduation. How much it costs for a girl to drop out of school. And this just is the story that we tell the corporate leaders. You know, if you don't pay for it now to keep a girl in school, you'll pay for it later. And she can either add to the economy or not. And then this cycle will recur. So take this information with you and always be on the alert. When you see things in the media, comment on them if you're around young people. Comment around them if you're around men. A lot of us take it for granted. I think my husband is probably one of the most surprised people when he looks at advertisements differently now. So I encourage you to take that to heart and keep reminding people who need to break those stereotypes. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for bearing out the snow. I hope everybody has a wonderful week, and I hope that if you have questions, you'll send them to me, but I also hope that you'll carry this message forward so that we can start breaking down some of those barriers. And stay away from the brats that look like. Take care. Thank you so much. And thank you, Upper Iowa, for having me here. I'm really honored to be here.